You know how everyone was talking about the ACC last week and how, oh, is it going to crumble? Oh, no, actually, things seem resolved. Or are they? And that was all the talk about the ACC last week. And usually, when someone's sort of going like this in college football, you want to know what's in the other hand because it seems like all the big stories are actually behind the curtain. And you got a good reason to feel that way because a lot of times that is the case. So what happened last week at Amelia Island, where the ACC was having their spring meetings, is you had a lot of reports about how there were 7-member institutions ready to just break off. And then there was a lot of folks saying, hold up, now you can't do that. You would owe a lot of money. We've got contracts. We've got grant of rights deals. You've got your copyright signed away. And then at the end, there was this little kumbaya moment where everyone lied to you and said, well, we're okay for the time being. No one's okay. They're not okay. We're not okay. It's not okay, but it's okay. That was basically how they left it. So the end of that story seems to be that there's going to be an agreement in the ACC to give the power players a little bit more of the revenue, a bigger slice of the pie, instead of evenly distributing money across the conference. Okay, so that was what got your attention last week. As we always talk about on the show, it's important not to lose the forest for the trees. I'm pretty sure Meemaw originated that quote, even though you've heard it from many people throughout your life. I'm pretty sure that's a Meemaw quote. What's happening right now? Really, aside from just the ACC, aside from just whether Arizona State's going to stay in the Pac-12, or just random stories out there, you can probably figure out there's interconnectivity. All of this is part of a bigger design, right? At least they have to be overlapped at some point. And they are, but it's so complicated to figure out. And you're driving your FedEx route. You got to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. You don't have time to worry about all this. You run a bakery. That's your Monday through Friday, 9 to whatever time it is you get off if you run a bakery. You don't have time to sort all this out. And I do a college football show, and I can't even sort it out. But that is the trees. Let's take a look at the forest, and let's understand where ultimately this is probably all headed. And if you don't really take away anything else this week, I think there was a really, really good article in the Omaha World Herald at the end of last week. It may have even been today or yesterday, but this is the first time you and I have gotten a chance to talk about it. And keep in mind, a lot of wheels in motion as of late in college sports, right? So Tom Chattel, who writes for the Omaha World Herald, he got Nebraska's president to go on the record and talk about a number of things. And when I say on the record, I mean it's his name behind the quotes, and he did not mince words when he talked about where he thought the sport was headed, not just this sport, but college athletics in general. Now, I'm showing you a quote on your screen. If you're listening on podcasts, let me give you context. There is a thought out there that college football is not headed towards a Power 5, but just with some conferences bigger than others, maybe a juiced-up SEC, a juiced-up Big Ten. No, there's a thought that we're headed towards a Power 2 world. There's a thought that you're headed towards whatever the Big Ten morphs into and whatever the SEC morphs into, rest of the sport be damned. That's a nightmare scenario for a lot of people. That is a dream scenario for some other people. It is not the scenario that I necessarily dream about, but it is a dream scenario for some people. So with that in mind, here's Ted Carter, Nebraska president, speaking to the Omaha World Herald. Quote, I'm on several national boards. I get to sit with a lot of top-tier presidents, and I can just tell you, this is the conversation that's happening right now. He's talking about that Power 2 structure. He's talking about moving towards a world where that's the case. What do you think about that quote? What do you think about that attitude, that thought? Because as is usually the case, whenever these big stories break, you notice how there's always language inside the story that sounds something like, even though this is breaking news to you, it's been known in inner circles for a long time. It's been talked about and bandied about in inner circles for a long time. Well, this is the inner circle. It just so happens that someone took a stethoscope and put it up to Ted Carter, and we got to hear what the inner circle's talking about. Now, there are several things that could mean. There are several things like, for example, self-governance that could be on the table. So as is usually the case, when there's a big story or there's a big change in college athletics, there is one group that thinks it's all bad. There's another group that thinks it's all good. I'm usually the one in the middle, maybe 70% one way or the other, that says there are probably some good things here, but they're outweighed by the bad, or vice versa. that new world would not be ideal for me. Actually, it would be great for the show. We'd make a ton of money on it. Nevertheless, I love college football, and so I would not like to see that world come to existence, even though it feels like we're probably tracking that way. But what would that mean? Because they got into a little bit more detail, and Tom Chattel, who wrote the piece himself, he talked about, and I'm sure it's guided, he talked about what that could mean, and it goes right in line with a lot of what we've talked about on the show. If you have that power to structure, you're talking about, in other words, adding some teams, probably, expansion on multiple fronts, and having about 40 to 50 teams in two conferences, if we want to call them that just kind of break off. And when I say break off, I mean break off. I mean self-governance. I mean a dynamic scheduling agreement and a whole new model, a whole new reworked media deal, but also unified NIL guidelines that really basically take all of these headlines and develop them into moot points because there is synergy. There is a working together side by side. You probably would also have the opportunity to enter into revenue sharing agreements with your student athletes. A lot of what you could do with this structure, in other words, would circumvent so many of the nickel and dime problems that you have right now in the name of players' rights and NIL, etc. There are some good things that would come from this. The shaving off of a chunk of the sport would be the price that you pay for that. The shaving off of entire portions of the country from the mainstream college football picture would be what you lose from that. There's an argument on the other side, and the argument on the other side is, hey, if this is the entertainment business, which you always say it is, if we've got 45 or 50 of the top properties in college sports, and they are playing in what equates to, I don't know, the NFC and the AFC, what more could you want? Now, this seems like it snuck up on you, but it shouldn't. Because I am telling you right now, this wasn't hard to see coming. And the way I know it wasn't hard to see coming is because Director Colin has a piece of footage that he has dug up from the archives. We got here in 2020. COVID happened about 5 minutes later, and so we had to do shows about whatever we could find to talk about. And we did a show one day, and I speculated about the future of college football and where we were headed. And Director Colin, I would like you to take the opportunity from 2020 archives to show the people what we said then. Are you comfortable with a future of college football existing where you just have the SEC and I would guess an entity like the Big Ten, and it really becomes a lot synonymous with what the NFC and the AFC are? And you've done so at the expense of many a program that had a story and a history and tradition all their own that used to be able to survive, that because of the new law of the jungle in college football is no longer able to survive. So, was it hard to see coming? Not really. I guess it was hard to see coming if you put a little bit too much faith in the people who run things. Maybe then you're taken a little bit by surprise. I never expect much from these people, and therefore nothing surprises me. In fact, quite the opposite. I would have been surprised if we didn't end up in this boat. Now, there is good news. That format would make for an insanely entertaining television product. Insanely entertaining. And I'm not here to suggest otherwise. That's why I'm not telling you it would be all bad news. Yes, absolutely. Think about the possibilities. If you have just a blown up Big Ten and a blown up SEC, what do? Do you then do what the NFL does? And what have we ever been chasing if not for the professionalization of college sports? How dare we have something unique? Would we then just have the equivalent of the NFC and AFC playoffs leading to a matchup in whatever college football Super Bowl would be called? Is that what we use? Is that what we construct? Is that the model that we work off of? Sure, it'd be entertaining. Just like the expanded playoff will be entertaining. The games themselves will be entertaining. I am anti-expansion, but I never said the product itself wouldn't be entertaining. It's just that, that there are some brands that look really good when I put them on. Do I want to know the story about what went behind bringing that brand to me? Not necessarily. In fact, sometimes if I learn that story, I say, I don't think wearing this shoe's worth it. I don't think wearing this hat's worth it. Same way here. Like, what are you giving up? What are we ultimately sacrificing? How many opportunities do you ultimately sacrifice? I'm not just even talking about players. I'm talking about coaches, I'm talking about administrative types. I'm talking about nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, etc. that have jobs right now. That may not have jobs in the future. Now, you'll never really see that on the front page of any headline because it's not front page news, but it's a reality. And so you got to decide, like, do you care about just the entertainment aspect, or do you care about that built on a foundation of something that's more than just entertainment at the end of the day? I've always fallen into the latter camp. I know some people fall into the former camp. That's okay. It's not that it makes you a bad person or me a good person. It just makes us have differing opinions. Imagine a world where we're allowed to have that. My feel on this is this course is pretty set. Now, if I'm in Nashville right now and I set my GPS to take me to Seattle, Washington, and I said, no interstates, no toll roads, the GPS is still going to find a way there. It may look like spaghetti plot on the way, but it'll still find a way there. So we may take a straight line to this world. We may take a very, very convoluted, etch-a-sketch direction to this new world, but I think we're headed to that new world. And so I left a little spot on the paper that's just blank. And that is the blank where I leave it open for your feelings. You weren't here and you didn't have the pen in your hand, so I don't really know. I think some people are jacked about it. I think other people understand, yeah, there's a little bit too much we're giving up. Because, see, college football was never a bad product. That's the point that I want to reemphasize and hammer home all the time when I'm talking about this stuff. We weren't ever hurting. This sport never needed saving. People came in and tried to fool you into thinking you needed saving. It's an age-old story. It's just new to college football, but it's an age-old story. Things are going so good that you can't point out the natural problems in any order of doing things, and so you've got to create them. You got to make them up so that you can then come in and be the hero to rework things and re-engineer things so that the net result is you acquire power and you acquire what you wanted, and then the rest of the folks are left saying, wait, what in the world just happened to us? Happens all the time. It just so happens college football was next on the menu. Again, it's not all bad. Not all bad. There would be some great advancements in the NIL and players' rights front from this. There would be great entertaining product on the television or on your device on Saturday. I'm not suggesting otherwise. Shows like ours would massively scale and flourish in that new world. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just telling you it's not my ideal world. And I leave it up to you to decide how you feel about it.